The morning sun rose gently over the hills of Enugu as Naomi stepped barefoot into the cool waters of River Oji. The congregation sang softly from the riverbank, while Pastor Obina's voice echoed, "Buried with Christ in baptism, raised in newness of life." Naomi's white robe clung to her skin, but her heart felt light-free for the first time in years. She emerged from the river feeling reborn, her hands lifted in praise, tears mingling with the droplets on her face. She was no longer just an orphan, she was God's beloved, chosen and called. Everyone clapped as she stepped back onto dry land, and her best friend Tenny threw a wrapper over her shoulders. Naomi couldn't stop smiling. This was the start of something new. Naomi had grown up in her grandmother, Mama Ego's clay-walled house after losing both her parents before her third birthday. Mama Ego, though poor, filled Naomi's life with love, discipline, and an unshakable faith in God. Sundays were Naomi's favorite days. She wore the one lace dress they owned, clapped the loudest during praise, and listened to Yagba's moonlight tales at night with the other children. It was during one of those church services that Naomi noticed Tosin Tenny's older brother playing the drums with intensity and joy. She watched him week after week, fascinated by his quiet strength and grace behind the instrument. Though he never spoke to her directly, Naomi cherished the few times he nodded at her. In her young heart, those nods were sacred. The world Naomi knew changed forever when Mama Ego passed away during one quiet Harmattan night. Naomi had returned from choir practice to find her grandmother lying still, her Bible open beside her. The funeral was swift, paid for by the church, and afterward, no family came forward. At just 16, Naomi was taken in by Pastor Obina and his wife, who gave her a small room behind the church office. Though grateful, the building never quite felt like home. She threw herself into church work, cleaning, singing, teaching Sunday school, anything to stay busy and numb the ache. But the nights were the hardest. In those moments, only prayer and tears kept her company. Even amid the sorrow, Tosin's occasional visits to the church became small rays of light. He had left Enugu briefly to study tailoring in Lagos, but when he returned for his father's memorial, Naomi saw him again taller, more confident, still lost in rhythm when he played the drums. Their eyes met after service, and this time he smiled. Naomi smiled back, heart skipping. He didn't need to say much. The look was enough to remind her that she was still seen, still remembered. Something inside her stirred again, not just love, but hope. And in that moment, Naomi promised herself she wouldn't just survive, she would live. Naomi moved to Lagos on a church-sponsored scholarship to study makeup artistry. The city was a whirlwind, blaring horns, endless traffic, and a pace that swallowed people whole. Yet somehow she thrived. She took classes by day, worked small bridal gigs on weekends, and lived in a modest flat in Yaba. The Lagos hustle toughened her, but she stayed rooted in faith, attending a vibrant church community where she quickly found opportunities to serve. Despite the fast life, something was missing. She missed home, missed simplicity, and deep down, she missed Tosin. Fate reconnected them at Pastor Obina's surprise 60th birthday celebration in Surulere. Naomi had come as the lead makeup artist, busy powdering faces and fixing jelly when Tosin walked in, clad in a sharp agbada of his own design. Their eyes met across the room and held for longer than necessary. "Naomi, you clean up nice for a church girl," he teased. She raised an eyebrow and shot back, "Tosin, still talking too much for a tailor." They laughed. That night, beneath the marquee lights and praise songs, the unspoken began to stir. Something had survived the years between them, and this time they were both old enough to feel it fully. Their friendship blossomed in a matter of weeks. Tosin owned a boutique fashion studio in Lekki, and soon Naomi became his unofficial creative partner, matching bridal makeup palettes with his couture designs. Late nights turned into shared suya by the roadside and early morning devotions in the studio. Beneath the laughter and banter, something deeper took root. Tosin was kind, purposeful, and never once treated Naomi like she was broken. One evening, after an exhausting wedding shoot, he handed her a dress he'd made for her, sleek, emerald green, stitched with patience and prayer. "I guessed your size," he said. Naomi tried it on. It fit like destiny. Soon after, under the quiet sky on Third Mainland Bridge, Tosin confessed his love. "I've loved you since the church drums, Naomi," he said. She froze for a moment, overwhelmed by how long her heart had waited for this exact moment. "I love you too," she whispered. They married the following year in a joyful ceremony filled with dance, worship, and tears. Naomi felt God smiling at her again. They returned to Lagos as husband and wife, full of dreams of love, of legacy, of a home with tiny feet running through it. But behind the joy lurked the unexpected silence of an empty womb. The first year of marriage passed with giggles and midnight snacks, but by the second, the silence in the nursery became deafening. Naomi marked her cycle religiously, tracking ovulation like a mission. But every month ended in disappointment. They tried everything: diet changes, supplements, even a church fertility seminar. Doctors ran test after test only to return with the same response: "There's nothing wrong, just keep trying." That answer brought no comfort. Naomi began to wonder if something was wrong with her that science simply couldn't see. She fasted, she prayed, but with each passing month, faith felt more like work than peace. Tosin, ever supportive, tried to remain upbeat. "God's time is best," he would say, but even he started staying longer at the studio. Naomi's joy dimmed. Family members began to whisper, friends stopped asking about when, and her mother-in-law began sending herbal mixtures with handwritten instructions. "Drink before sunrise, before intimacy," the notes would read. Naomi was torn. She didn't believe in traditional rituals, but desperation has a way of clouding conviction. One evening, while kneeling on the tile floor in tears, she whispered, "God, where are you in all of this?" But heaven remained painfully still. Naomi converted her dressing mirror into a wall of warfare: sticky notes of scriptures, photos of babies she'd once done makeup for, and a calendar marked with fasting days. She cried in tongues. She prayed with anointing oil. Still, each cycle betrayed her. Her body ached with longing, and her faith began to wither in the face of unchanging reality. When Tosin returned home to find her burning the herbs his mother sent, he didn't say a word. The silence between them grew thick. They still shared a bed, but not the intimacy. Their once lively home now felt like a tomb of hope. One afternoon, Naomi broke down after a client's baby shower, locking herself in the bathroom for hours. Tosin begged her to open the door. "I don't want a child with just anyone," he whispered from the other side. "I want one with you." But Naomi didn't answer. The shame, the pressure, the feeling of being a failure as a woman, it all weighed her down like chains. She began pushing Tosin away, convinced he would eventually leave her. "Maybe you should just find someone else. Someone who can give you what I can't," she said through gritted teeth. It was the first time the word goodbye hovered in their home. Naomi left Lagos quietly and returned to Enugu, needing space to breathe. She moved into a spare room at the church guest house, far from the noise, the pressure, and the pain. She spent her mornings praying under mango trees and her nights staring at the stars, Mama Ego once pointed out. One day, while heading home from a wedding gig, she saw an elderly woman struggling with a heavy bucket. Naomi offered to help. The woman, grateful and kind, invited her in and gave her a shawl. "For the mother you already are," she said with a smile. Naomi blinked back tears, sensing something divine in the woman's words. Though she didn't know why, Naomi returned to the woman's house the next day, only to find the home empty, abandoned, as though no one had lived there in years. Confused but strangely comforted, she tucked the shawl into her bag. That evening, she knelt by her bed and prayed differently, not begging, not bargaining, just surrendering. "If you never give me a child, Lord, I will still call you good," she whispered. In that moment, peace returned like a long-lost friend. Naomi didn't have answers, but she had rest, and for the first time in years, that was enough. Tosin showed up unannounced in Enugu, holding a bouquet of hibiscus flowers and a quiet plea in his eyes. "Come away with me," he said. "Let's retreat. Just us. And God." Naomi hesitated, but the sincerity in his voice cracked her defenses. They flew to a Christian resort tucked away in the hills of Kenya, a place where silence felt sacred and worship echoed through the trees. There in the quiet, they unpacked their wounds. They cried, laughed, and worshiped together again for the first time in months. On the final night, they prayed side by side, asking God for mercy not just for children, but for healing. They returned to Lagos and began IVF, hopeful but guarded. The process was brutal hormonal injections, physical discomfort, and emotional strain. Naomi's body reacted violently, and there were moments she thought she might not make it. Tosin became her nurse, her encourager, her silent strength. They laid hands on her belly every night, declaring life. Then, one rainy Thursday morning, the doctor called with the result, positive. Naomi collapsed into Tosin's arms, weeping. "We're pregnant," she whispered over and over, as though speaking it aloud would make it more real. The wilderness had finally broken into bloom. Their joy multiplied when the first scan revealed twins. Naomi laughed through tears as the sonographer pointed out 2 strong heartbeats on the monitor. Tosin kissed her knuckles and whispered, "Double for your trouble." They decorated the nursery with mustard yellow and teal, colors of joy and new beginnings. Naomi's YouTube followers rejoiced with her, flooding her comments with prayers and testimonies. Even Mama Tosin, once so critical, danced around the house singing old Igbo praise songs. Everything finally felt right until Naomi collapsed one night at 34 weeks, clutching her stomach, pain slicing through her like fire. At the hospital, doctors rushed her into an emergency C-section. Hours passed in agonizing silence until a nurse emerged with a stunned smile. "They're all fine. All 3 of them." Naomi blinked. 3? The doctor confirmed it. She had given birth to triplets. A 3rd child had been hidden during the scans. Naomi sobbed uncontrollably, holding her babies one by one. It was more than she had asked for, more than she imagined. She remembered the shawl from the mysterious woman, still folded neatly in her drawer. As she rocked her children, she finally understood. God had not only answered, He had overwhelmed her with grace. Months later, with the babies cooing in their bassinets, Naomi returned to Enugu, determined to thank the old woman who had given her the shawl. But when she arrived, the house was gone, replaced by an empty, overgrown plot. Neighbors insisted no such woman had lived there. Naomi stood in the same spot, the memory vivid, the shawl in her arms. "An angel," she whispered, voice cracking. She was an angel. Back home, Tosin met her with a quiet hug and warm tea. They didn't need to say much. They both knew now God had written their story from the beginning, even through the silence, even through the ache. Every night, Naomi prayed over her children, teaching them the same faith that had carried her. "Broken crayons still color," she whispered to them, "and broken hallelujahs still rise." Her home was no longer filled with unanswered prayers, but with laughter, spilled baby formula, and the scent of grace. She didn't just become a mother, she became a testimony. As the babies giggled and Tosin hummed a lullaby in the background, Naomi looked out the window, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you." In the end, God didn't just restore her. He made her story a living altar of beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, and grace upon grace. The end. What part of this story touched you the most? Was it Naomi's faith, the mysterious woman, the struggle with infertility, or the final miracle? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe stories like this can uplift someone else. Tag a friend who needs encouragement. Follow for more powerful, faith-based African stories that reflect real struggles and real hope.